Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux taking a look at race number 3 at Santa Anita on Saturday. An important prep, perhaps, for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. This is the Grade 2 Chandelier. Let's throw up the field. $200,000 is the purse. They are going a mile and a 16th. We have a full field of 10. Several of these fillies last competed in the Del Mar Debutante, where they ran into divisional leader Tamara. Laurent is the one that's going to be favored out of those horses. She ran very well to be second, and it's interesting that Peter Urton's putting blinkers on for the first time around 2 turns.
It is interesting because she really hasn't been close to things early on, so we might see a change of tactics from her, and maybe that's what the connections think she needs. She barely got up in that maiden special weight score on debut, but last time out, she ended up being the best of the rest. That's what the run line says, and she was much the best. And I actually think she had a little bit of a disadvantage with that post draw as well. So on paper, she's probably the one to beat here, Dan.
Not only are these fillies still figuring out their proper class level, they're also trying to figure out how far they want to go. Distance going to be a key in the Chandelier, as is pace. And the Timeform U.S. pace projector, not surprisingly, is the number 7 Dua, who is a very fleet daughter of Arrogate, expected to make the lead, stretching out off 2 sprints. The horse on the rail, though, the number 1 Chatala, also has some speed, and I think they're going to try to keep that forward position down towards the rail and not give that inside up.
And I think they probably have to. Based on what we saw on debut, she was close to a quick tempo and lost him out a bit quicker than that, and she was still pretty close. So I think pretty much based on the draw alone, their hands a little forced in this spot.
Let's talk a little bit more about the number 1 Chatala. Came from just off the pace to win her debut. I thought that was a pretty professional performance. And then second out in the Del Mar Debutante, it was a big ask against Tamara. She took a lot of money in that race, 3-1, was on a hard chase early and tired. I think she benefited a lot from a fitness standpoint, and I think she's bred enough to get the distance.
Probably is bred enough to get the distance. I think last time out, it's tough. Part of me wants to say, well, I wish she would have showed a little bit more in the stretch, but they ended up being pretty strung out, the top 4 or 5 in there. You can see there's several lengths between all of them in terms of their finish. And I think all in all, she did run well. Looking at that race, Tamara was the horse to beat. Outside of that, I thought the race was pretty wide open from a betting perspective. And I think she ran okay overall.
Shipping all the way out from the East Coast, a very confident placement from Todd Pletcher, owner Mike Rapoli. The number 2 Scalable is a daughter of Speightstown, who didn't take a lot of money for her debut at Saratoga, going 7/8 of a mile. She showed brief speed on the outside, was in between horses on the turn, kind of gave a one-paced finish. Just looking her over on the track, to me, she looked like the kind of filly that probably needed a race. I think she'll appreciate getting out in distance. Now it's all about how good she is.
I think we see this a lot with Todd Pletcher horses, right? They don't take a lot of love on debut. They're not necessarily ice cold on the board. They're not double digits, but people take a wait and see approach, maybe because they think race day experience is the edge, the distance isn't right, and sometimes they just need a start. We've heard that from Todd and multiple trainers. You're just looking to get a race and some foundation, and I think that's probably the case with this one last time out, and I think this is a pretty confident spot to be going into based on that performance. Look at a horse that finished 5th, split a field, ran okay, and now you're going into Grade 2 waters. You must think there's more in the tank.
Trainer Doug O'Neill's done a little bit of everything with the 3 Pacific Rose. Debuted her sprinting on the turf, then ran her sprinting on the dirt. Now going to try her 2 turns on the dirt. She's yet to register a top 3 finish from 2 lifetime starts, but she's very lightly raced. She has a lot of upside potential. Again, another situation where this is a huge class test.
It is a huge class test. I do think she ran better on the dirt. Her figures weren't drastically different, but she was making up more ground. So there's 2 ways to look at it. Do you think she can go, 2 turns now off of that? I'm curious to see what her tactics will be as well. I mean, she was sort of shuffled further back in that last race. I don't know necessarily after what we've seen from her so far where I expect to see her early on.
Foundation shouldn't be an issue for her uncoupled stablemate, the number 4, Pink Whitney. She's coming into this race off 2 runs at a mile. Now, both of them happen to be on the turf. And I think one of the issues with Pink Whitney is, A, she's still a maiden, but B, she just doesn't have a lot of early speed. And I'm very concerned that she'll just be outrun early.
Yeah, her last 2 efforts, they were okay. Obviously, they were at the mile on the turf, and she finished 4th in both of them. I thought they were pretty similar trips, maybe not too back in the sense that she was further back, but she got the pace help that she needed in that race compared to her last out effort where they did go a bit slower and she was more in touch with the field early on. She is entered in another spot, so that makes you wonder what the connections are going to aim to do with her in her dirt race. I mean, I know it was the debut, but in my opinion, she didn't show too much over the surface.
The number 5, Autumn Chill, is the one filly in this race that you don't worry about distance. Here she is winning start number 3, a 2-turn mile at Del Mar, fitting the MO of many Keith DeZormo trained 2-year-olds. Keith likes to give them a run or two before they find their best stride. And this is a really likable performance because she was down inside. She took dirt in her face. She gets to the outside. She still has work to do. She looks comfortable kicking down this leader.
She does, and it takes her a little bit to get going. I thought she picked it up a little bit more in those final stages to the wire, and the big question will be, what did she really face in that group? We don't know yet, but I do think a lot had to do with that distance, and that's something that we start to talk about. Basically, everyone so far, they haven't gone that far yet on the dirt with the exception of her, so I do agree that it gives her a little bit of an edge in this spot.
Gate to Paradise is a horse I'm really interested in using in this race at a bit of a price for John Sheriff, stretching out off 2 sprints. Kind of a weird race in the Del Mar debutante where she was wide on the turn and seemingly going nowhere. Kent DeZormo took her all the way to the outside, and then the next thing you know, she switched leads and she ran on again to be third. So I think she's still learning. She's running in spots, and maybe that experience did her a world of good.
You mentioned her getting out. You think, too, she's probably getting tired. She switches leads. She finds that little extra energy burst and is able to kick on there. I think she's one that I think, based on what we've seen in 2 starts, should really like stretching out around 2 turns. And I think we might get a nice trip in here. Whereas others, we talked about maybe forwardly placed, they've had a lot of work to do. I think, and when I look at this field, she could be just a couple of lengths off the pace setters with maybe 3, 4 runners in front of her with a couple of targets in front of her and maybe able to pick it up more in the stretch run.
She's a daughter of Arrogate, as is the expected Speed. The number 7, Dua, who was a very game debut winner at Del Mar, didn't break the best, dueled in between horses, looked like she was going to be past an upper stretch and then came back to win. She was tested last time out in the Grade 3 Sorrento, and again, she sat off of the pace and just couldn't keep up when these 2 nice fillies in front of her just sort of sprinted away. She's been working in typical quick fashion for Baffert, and she's going to show speed, and I don't see from a pedigree standpoint why she wouldn't stay.
We know the winner here is very speedy and a horse that's kind of maybe surprised people, but now people are really noticing the winner. And the runner-up, Benedetta, I think we've both maybe taken some stabs against Benedetta in the past, and she kind of is an honest, nice horse as well. So I'm curious to see Dua stretch out in distance. Obviously has the benefit of maybe, is this one, I don't want to say lonely on the lead, but could be maybe just having one other rival pressure her early on. I just wonder, going at the longer distance, can she set more moderate fractions? Is that going to be the difference maker for her?
The number 8, Laurent, really hinted at some serious ability in her career debut. You usually don't see 2-year-old fillies win 5.5 furlong races like that. Banged around, leaving the start double digits behind after a quarter mile, and then rallying to pass 7 horses in the final 8th. She was live in the Del Mar debutante. She broke from an outside post, was very wide on the backstretch. Here she is moving into second behind Tamara, who's the divisional leader, and she stays on very gamely for second. Keep an eye on that gray on the outside. That's Gate to Paradise, who will eventually run on for third. But Laurent did very well in this race behind a very good filly, and I could certainly see her moving forward.
I think she will move forward here, and I think the equipment change is interesting. Blinkers on, as we've talked about. She really hasn't done herself favors early on in those last 2. But last time out, it was going longer. There was a little bit more pace for her to run at, but she was just second best. You mentioned Gate to Paradise, another one to watch there, because I thought her stretch move, as we've talked about, was pretty impressive. But we'll see. We'll see what the blinkers end up doing for this filly.
The number 9 is Motet. She hasn't had it easy in 2 lifetime starts. She's a maiden. They've tried her in Graded Stakes company both times, once against Dreamfire in the Sorrento, once against Tamara in the Del Mar debutante, where she passed some tired horses to finish 6th. She hasn't shown a lot of speed right now. I think she's hoping for a barbecue up front and a pace collapse.
Yeah, and I just don't know against this group if that's going to happen. She might get the barbecue, as you've alluded to, but she may not get the pace collapsing that she needs. And I just think other horses have shown more so far. And, I don't like to bring up the tote board all the time, but she's gone off at 54-1 and 143-1. She just, doesn't have what I'm looking for in this spot.
Next Right Thing completes the field. Tough outside post in this 2-turn heat. She was 103-1 in the Del Mar debutante and picked up some tired horses late to finish 5th. I'm just expecting similar tactics. I know she didn't break great last time out, but here you break. I think you take back to last. You try to save as much ground as possible. You try to pick off some tired horses. Maybe you get a very valuable Grade 1 placing.
Maybe you do. I do think the break did cost her last time out, right? She was shuffled pretty far back compared to what we saw on debut. Wonder about the surface as well. I mean, it's tough to say based on just that one dirt start what really went wrong besides the break last time out. I'm just not sure. For me, I see her in the spot being that effective.
Let's take a look at our top selections for the Grade 2 Chandelier. We'll see if Laurent can take the step forward with the addition of blinkers. She is way the horse to beat. I'm going to take a really slight stab against her with the 2 Scalable. Just really interested that this is the spot that Pletcher and Rapoli decide to run her in second time out. I'm expecting her to be a lot fitter, but you're going 8, 6, 7, 5. Laurent, the horse to beat. Gate to Paradise might be the interesting price play.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm curious to see how this race will be bet. I think, Laurent should go off favorite here. I'm curious about your horse in here. You might get a good price on this horse. Just looking at others in here, as you've mentioned, the 8, the 6, and the 7 might take a lot of the love, but it's a wide open race. You wonder about the equipment change. Will that help Laurent? Will it hinder her? I think it's probably more likely the first of those two. I think we're going to see a better performance, but I don't know how much better she has to be considering she's not facing Tamara on this spot.
The local road to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies goes through the Chandelier on Saturday. It's the 3rd race at the Great Race Place. Best of luck.